recognize that, yes, I am from Alaska, and this is how far I came. But anytime I can come back to Asia, because originally I'm from Taipei, so I always have a little detour to go home and see my parents, and then food. That's another big attraction. So this is the place where I came from about 10 days ago, and then this might end up going back with more snow. And we have wonderful wildlife animals coming to our campus. And this is in front of the arts building. And they treat our flower pot as their salad bar. And they also bring their baby to eat that as well. So, and that's happening very, very often. And it's funny, if you ever come to Alaska, you know, the locals, when we see a moose, we walk back and the tourists go forward. And they're not a friendly animal, believe me, so I hope you'll take my advice. Go backward. Don't ever try to go forward. So, okay, a little bit about myself. I teach at a university, but I do see myself as a museum educator, and I have done a lot of museum projects. I've been in museum for about 7-8 years before I moved back into academia. So I used to work for the Indianapolis Museum of Art, the Children's Museum, Metropolitan Museum, Herschel Museum, many other places. And I'm really in for technology for education, for interpretation, for learning and understanding, and then professional development, and most importantly, technology should be for fun. But today, I'm wearing 2 hats for my presentation. One end, I'm a museum educator, and I do development, but at the same time, I'm a museum goer, so everywhere I go, either, I don't know, I think it's a good thing rather than a bad thing that I check into a museum first rather than tourist attraction. So I'm going to share with you some of my observations by looking at a series of new media presentations. And then I'm going to ask all of you to think about how can we use new media for interpretation, in particular in the context of Asian arts. And the most important thing, I put this, the artistic conception in Chinese is the Yi Jing. It's very kind of abstract, you know, way of understanding Asian art. So keep that in mind. But before we get started, I want to ask all of you, do you see any difference between new media art and new media interpretation? I think from yesterday or from your current experience and experience from the past, we probably have seen a lot of new media art and new media interpretation, but what are the differences? Can you think of one? I know I always force my students to talk, but but I think I take my teacher's hat off. But from my point of view, the new media art, most of them are the artist's voice, the artist's interpretation. They can use all kinds of elements out of the traditional artwork, or they create a new artwork, and also it's the artist's personal interpretation, because that's the artwork. And new media interpretation, remember, I'm having this museum educator's hat on. A lot of time when we go out and see new media interpretation, I would say it's kind of a kinetic action, like move your hands, move your feet, and then sometimes show off technology. Or a lot of time it's really for the visual excitement and for emotional experience. We have seen quite a few examples here, and I'm going to show you a few more today. And the next one will be using new media for learning and understanding, in particular understanding the content, and then the Yi Jing, the artistic conception. So now, the next few examples, I put myself as an audience. I'm not an educator. I want to put myself to experience all those new media installations. And then I constantly ask myself the same question: is this a new media art, or is this a new media interpretation? So, everybody recognize this? Of course, if you're here in Asia, that's the Taipei 101. I went there, I think, I don't know how many times, but one time, way back in 2008, everybody go up to the observation deck, right? And then when you come down to see the damper, and you have to walk through, several pathways and stairs. And then I encountered this little walk path. How many have seen this? I think one time I was on this end. I think this is a picture that I took. There's one person in front of me. I saw, wow, what is that? It's kind of some interaction. Until I start walking onto it, I say, oh my gosh, can you see it? It's like you're looking down to the street, up to like a 91st floor or something like that. So this is kind of using new media for some sort of interpretation and or experience, right? It's kind of you cannot experience that, but the new media can help you to experience that kind of sensation. And then the next project is the 会动的清明上河图. How many of you have seen this? I think they were here in Hong Kong, and that was the kind of what do you call it? The big thing for the China Pavilion in 2010, the Shanghai Expo. And it's really originated from Qing Dynasty painting as a long script. So this is really have to cut into 3 parts because to show you, it's a beautiful story about a snapshot of daily life in Bianjing, the city, Kaifeng, from the beginning, from the outside of the city wall to at the end of the city wall. So there's a lot of stories. So when the Shanghai Expo did this, they used, I don't know, 500 animators to create that, and this is the installation. They enlarged that, make it this whole presentation like 10 meters tall and 100 meters wide. And on top of that, you have also to remember they have average of 200,000 people coming through every day. So how can you accommodate that much of visitors on that quantity and then still have the experience to enjoy the painting? And so you can see that just this is the beginning of the story, which is right at the city wall. And then this is Hongqiao, the most beautiful arch bridge. I think most of the Chinese, we grew up understanding this or knowing this piece, right? And then the animators, they put almost like 1,000 characters, make them into, they're just using the same character who's the fisherman, the labor worker, the chef, whoever their action, and make them interactions in the painting, and then they change the scenery from the daytime and nighttime. But again, keep the big questions. Is this a new media art or is this a new media interpretation? And to assert what level, is this really for the visual experience or do you have an opportunity to learn more about it? I think for me, this is a fantastic, visually elegant, stunning, because the size and the way they present it. But unfortunately, if you do not know much about this painting, you probably will not have the opportunity to learn more about it. It's just like you pay the movie ticket, right? You're going and enjoy a beautiful experience. The next one, 梦想馆, Pavilion of Dreams. This is, I think it's 2011, the Flower Expo in Taipei. So how many of you have been there if you know? So this is one of the pavilions. And this is made up of like 5 areas and the whole story surrounding with the flowers and then the ecosystems and then the interaction between the nature and our living space. So that's the storyline. So when you walk into it, this gigantic mechanical flowers. It's totally computerized and the computer do the motions and change the colors. So this is really the opening of the experience when you walk into this Pavilion of Dreams. And then once you get this kind of wow factor, your journey begins. Each of you will be given our RFID wristband, and then you're going to register onto a machine, and you put your hand there and they project a 3D hologram flowers because that will be your journey, your flower, and this flower, and you have to close your hand and because of remember on your wristbands, and that will take you through the rest of the journey. And through the journey, you can go on the Googles or YouTube, there's a lot of postings. So if you want to see the entire thing, just type like a 2011 Taipei or Flower Expo and the Pavilion of Dreams, you'll find a lot of information. So even in this place, you can see, you can even hug the tree or breathe to the tree and the tree will react to you. So it's a very kind of personal experience. And then they have a 360 panorama theater that kind of give you the sense about the city, about Taipei. You know, it's like, I don't know, 9 minutes long or something like that you can experience. And then when you move on with your journey, you will see another mechanical flower or lantern type of environment, a lot of lightings and the actions, they will change shape and move on. And then toward the end of your journey, there's another kind of a sensory station that you put your wristband on it, and then the flower that been with you, we're going to release back into this big river, projected river kind of a projection, and then go all the way toward the end and kind of back into this kind of floral whatever universe. And the one last, so this is all sort of intangible, right? It's just the experience. You can only experience in that environment. But really, this is the one last part I love it so much. When you exit to experience, when you deposit your little wristband, they print a postcard. And this flower is unique to your experience. It's not generic. Because I thought maybe that's a generic, but actually with your friends and everybody, all different. They record how long you were in there, what was your journey, how many places you've been to. They also give you little words at the bottom. It's very kind of a touching moment that I can hold on to this to remember the experience. But again, they use tons of new media. But have you learned something? Probably will get a little bit sense about what the ecosystem and your interaction with the city and the space and so forth. But again, they really focus on this experience. So that's how they use the media for it. And the next example, I think this one, James yesterday mentioned about it. This is a Century Hebi. It's a Fan Hongwang is a Chinese painter, and the National Palace Museum asked, the artist, the media artist, commissioned him to come and do this piece. And again, like he said yesterday, it's beautifully done, but when I was in this space, there's one question that bothers me the most. When we walk into an environment, either we want to learn or we want to experience, right? And in between these two, there's third question keep coming back to me. Says, I asked the question, whose voice is in here? Is the tradition, is the artwork, or is the artist's voice? Am I seeing a piece of new media art, or this piece will help me to understand what this old, traditional scroll is all about? So I couldn't find the answer. I've been bothering a lot, and I realized because I'm really comfort with, I'm getting artist's voice, not the voice of the object. And then another example, I think he also mentioned yesterday, the Four Seasons in Huashan Culture Center. And I think you saw a little bit, they have a different technology, very cutting edge technology. You can use sound control, you can use motion gesture, you can use the depth distance detection to give you some sense of depth in the Chinese painting, and the zoom in and zoom out function with great details. But everybody have a wonderful time, but when you get out there, you still have no idea. Those are based on these 4 beautiful, beautiful Chinese paintings that's in the Palace collection. We did some exit interviews, and I say, do you know what's the name? Do you know what's the artist? Do you know what this is all about? Unfortunately, none of them, very, very minimum people can tell us what's happening. And then, but they have a great time. Kids love it. So here's the questions, right? When we use new media, where we need to go and how far we have to go. So kind of summary from all the wonderful speakers that we have from yesterday. You know, you're also thinking you want to use media to spark connection across cultures and time. You want to ignite curiosity, conversation, creativity. And one of the speakers in your abstract said you really want to engage with the subtle and complex cultural knowledge. So just refresh those examples that I just mentioned, right? Some of them you can get into a little bit more, some of them on the more superficial level, some of them more personal level, some of them just experiential. So keep those in mind. And now I'm putting back my museum educators mode. I put the logo as a museum because a lot of time when we go out and use new media, we just focus on the technology and new media. But a lot of time we forgot museum is still there. So I have to remind everybody museum and the objects is in there, and then have to focus on the interpretation part of it, and then we have to allow the cultural objects, the paintings, the sculptures, to have their own voice, to tell their stories. Then we can connect them, you know, and make a meaningful connection to our audience. So next few examples I'm going to talk about. This is some kind of new, not too new. This is the 2011 Taiwan International Culture and Creative Expo. This is the Culture and Technology Pavilion. And so in this pavilion, they started with this story. So the first one, Taohuayuan. I think if you understand Chinese, you will know this is a Chinese literature. It's a utopian kind of land. Farmer falling asleep, and then he woke up and walking to pass, just like an Narnia, you know, pass through the trees, and then went into a very kind of utopian land. And this is what the journey, kind of an interpretation of what that Taohuayuan means. So in this installation, probably have seen a lot, like one that I just mentioned from the Huang Tong Wang, the Sanshui Hebi, the earlier one. But in this case, they did a little bit differently. Do you see the spotted light? That's for user. You can stand there, and the motion detector will find you, and then they will trigger an animation. Could be a flower, could be a bird, could be the farmer. It will be able to enable you to follow the journey into this utopian kind of land. So that's kind of opening of the experience of this pavilion. But I do have the clips. I want to show it to you. I do have non-clip, but for the time. And then they combine with performance and the imagery of this Taohuayuan. So, as you can see in this picture, and without me to explain it to you, I want you to see it yourself, to see how the I Ching be interpreted through the medium. Similar to the lotus pond, right? But it's just a different form. They incorporate performance into it with those cloth, and the fish will follow you. It really create another poetic, you know, experience to it. So I think everybody's so quiet, so I hope you're not falling asleep. You really get into this whole story. That's all I wanted. See, this is a new media, and the combination with performing arts and the interpretation really kind of bring you into this idea of what this Taoyuan, this utopian land is all about. And another project that I get to know through this company, the Bright Ideas company in Taipei, they're working on Yuan. Anybody, I think if you're in Chinese, this is the summer palace for the Qing emperors right outside of Beijing, being burned after the Box Rebellion. So it's totally its heritage, nothing left but stones and broken pieces. So this is just another kind of a mock-up. How can you recreate or retell the story of the beautiful garden that being developed way back, started in 1735. That's the beginning of it, and the whole development of the garden took 5 emperors and last 150 years old. So there's a lot of great stories in there, but again, using new media, how can you combine not only the imagery of the painting, which is a lotus flower, but also mix or integrate it with the current theme. So it's still kind of a combining the past and then the current. So go back to my emphasis in my talk, which is, I know the time, so I'm really making a little bit faster, but I'm saving the last part of best because I have another short animation. I want to show it to you how new media in the context of interpretation can bring the audience really into to see and understand Chinese painting, like this one. What's your reaction? I know we have a lot of Asian friends here, probably have seen those a lot, but for a lot of people who are not familiar with Chinese painting, most of the time they display in very, very dark environments, right? And they're really not that big. It's only like a 50 centimeter, like probably this much, and then 136 will be like this big. So how can you see the details to fully understand? But if you can read Chinese, 赤壁赋 is a big battlefield in Sanguo that was way back almost, I don't know, 800 or 900 years ago, but it's a big, historical event. So as an Asian or Chinese in particular, we read the story all the time, so we sort of know about that. Unless you're really a history buff, then you'll remember the details. But we sort of know the things, and now we have this beautiful painting, but how can you get into it? How can you understand what the poetic, expression that artists want to put and share that with us? And on top of that, go back to the current. If you're in this culture, we know the Chibi, that's where the location is, that's where the battle happens. And then along the way, there's a lot of beautiful poems being written about this, about the expression, about the feeling, about when the poem 舒适 came to Chibi and realized kind of thinking, oh wow, that battle happened a few hundred years ago, and kind of make a connection. It's a beautiful poem. But again, go back. How can we use new media to help our audience to get into the level beyond looking at painting? I put the Chinese word here, looking at painting. I think that's a typical practice when we do museum education. Say, what do you see? What do you look? What's in front of you? But in the context of Chinese reading, we call it read the painting, 读画. I think I assume a lot of Chinese, you heard that word. It's not just looking. You start reading it. You read into the strokes. You read into the seals. You read into the words. You read into the details. And in fact, this painting, it really gives you another universe. They want you to experience, in this look like three-dimensional space, which is not at all, that you can make connection to the location, the history, the poem, and then connecting back here. And then how can we help our audience or our viewers to better appreciate the beauty of Chinese painting and in onto the poetic level. And here it is.
Because Herminia may have to run off to take a taxi to the airport, we'll entertain a question or two right now.
Any
For Herminia?
questions?
No questions? Yes. You over there.
Thanks. Herminia, in that picture you had some guys on a boat, some characters traveling across the sea on a canoe or a boat. Where did you get them from? They're in the painting down below. Okay, got it. Okay, I'm just curious of this process of, because we're involved in it a lot too, of animating scroll paintings and what it means when the painting itself is already animated.
So the whole idea is coming out of this painting.
Yeah, sure.
Now you can see.
Yeah.
But just give you that kind of a 水墨, you know, the water and ink, which is a unique character in Chinese painting.
Yes.
And the artistic conception, the 意境, to understand the relationship between the nature and the human and then the space.
Okay.
Because the three-dimensional space, which we lack in traditional Chinese painting.
Okay.
But the three-dimensional space does exist.
Yes.
But right now this is flat. But the new media can give you that sense, and that's where we can do it today.
Okay.
To combine that, to bring this painting back in life. Okay.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Another question? Yeah. Right there.
Hi, Herminia. So this is beautiful, right? And we can read, we can look. Now, I'm just worried. I'm just thinking, what's the direction of us as a museum community moving forward? Because if young generations start getting used to new media, so every time they look at the painting, then the next idea will be, okay, let me look at the animated version. So instead of looking at the real painting, then would audience start losing the imagination? Because that's what we enjoy, imagining the painting instead of
Looking, just watching the TV clip, for example.
I think it has to see in different steps. If they have no knowledge about the Chinese painting, this can be the entry point, right? You show them something very dark. It's pretty bright, believe me, this painting is pretty dark. And very fragile and low lights, not much you can see, and they're very, very small. and they give you a distance, like, I don't know, 100 meters away from to seeing that. So this can serve as an entry point. So when they build up the knowledge, when they build up the connection, hopefully by the next level, they are able to do hua instead of just look at it. So that's where the new media is facilitating that.
Okay, I think we're going to have to leave it there because of
One last,
one
okay, I'll
more.
take it
Okay,
in case I have to run. So.
But certainly with different level of learners, we have different approach. And I can sense the depth in terms of your presentation because being a Chinese, we know the context. I would like to seek your advice in terms of when we introduce the concept, like seeing a painting, not just read a painting. What's a different sort of approach would you say approach it when they're kids or younger children and compare with adults? I mean, who might, like a lot of audience, it's the first time we encounter the Chinese painting. Would you use different methodology, if not, pedagogies as you introduce painting?
I think for one step at a time, it's just from the details, from the story, because I'm time limit today. If I had time, probably I'm going to tell a 5-minute story about this and design for the age-appropriate, group. And I'll take you into it, get you to start looking at it, finding the details. But when I want to move you into the next level, I think the animation will begin to show you what the clouds, the fog, the mist that create this poetic. And a lot of kids, they do have studied this before. So it's a connection to the literature, connection to the painting, connection to the history, and connecting to the words and the idea. And now you have the new media for interpretation. So it's just a different age group. It depends on how you plan for that. So that's another, 2 hours. So, but thank you.
Okay, thank you for.